Hey, welcome. We're here at the Leach Teaching Gardens at Texas A&M, and we're looking forward to doing our first inaugural Aggie Horticulture What's Growing On webinar, or not webinar, but Facebook Live. We'll be doing this over the coming weeks. You'll get the opportunity to hear from a lot of different folks. My name is Skip Richter, and I'm going to be kicking it off today, but first we're going to wait a few minutes and give people a chance to get online. So enjoy a look around the gardens in the meantime.
As you guys start to get online, if you all would just in the comment box let us know that you're there and maybe where you're watching from, that would be awesome. We're going to allow a few minutes for people to kind of get online with us. The Leach Teaching Gardens is one of the wonderful assets that we have here at Texas A&M University, and we're so excited to be able to do our first Facebook Live here. But be looking for this. We're going to be doing them every Wednesday and Friday, and we'll have a complete list on the Aggie Horticulture Facebook page. Oh, we've got folks from Lubbock, from Hallettsville.
Nice.
And just a reminder to those of you, as we'll have folks waiting on, Bossier City, Louisiana, howdy to you. Cedar Hill, Texas, howdy. Remember, we have a group of our online Aggie horticulture specialists, both county extension agents and a specialist across the state, that will be here waiting to answer your questions. So if you have a particular question about what Skip is covering, please be sure to put it in the comment box. We will get those answered, and then we will have a recording of this where it will be posted online. We've got Flower Mound, Denton County Master Gardener Association, Uvalde, Texas, Houston. Wow, it's awesome. What a great way to connect. Thank you guys for joining us today. Flagstaff, Arizona, Cypress, Texas. So a lot of folks here online. Whoop from Houston, Gilmer, Texas, Odessa, Sugarland. This is awesome. It's a little rainy here in College Station, but you know, as gardeners, we are never going to turn down rain. It's a great thing, so that's great. Oh, Leo, hi from Athens, Georgia. Okay, Skip, so whenever you're ready, I think we can go ahead and start, and just be sure to put your comments and questions in as we go along, and our Aggie Hort team is ready to answer.
That's right. We've got Aggie County horticulturists with the department all over the state, and they're going to be answering your questions. So please do ask some questions, and perhaps some of them I can even answer online if it's something maybe that I wasn't clear about as I was talking about it. So welcome. Yes, we are standing out in the rain today. You know, the COVID virus has moved us all back in our homes. But even though our public programs are on hold, that hasn't stopped AgriLife Extension from continuing to educate and reach out to the public with quality research-based educational programs. And that's why we're here today. We hope you'll join us in the future episodes of this, because I think it's just going to get better as it goes. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about starting off in a garden. Maybe you've never grown vegetables before and you'd like to try. I think it's the most fun thing to do in the world. I love being out in the garden. If you've got kids, you absolutely have to be out in the garden. But even from the standpoint of just raising good, healthy food, enjoying the process of growing it yourself, and I guess you could say it's going to be, in some cases, 500, 1,500 miles fresher when you grow it 5 feet from the back door than it is when it gets brought in from other places. You know, gardening is not only a chance to grow things you enjoy, but it's kind of a sociological experience and being able to enjoy being with nature. And so we want to encourage people to do that, but we want you to do it in a way where you're successful. Some people say they have a brown thumb. Well, I don't think there's any such thing as a brown thumb. I think a green thumb is just knowing how to do it right for your area, and that's what we're going to talk about. So let's start about soil. First of all, you want to select a location that's got good light. Vegetables need sunlight. Sun shines on leaves. Leaves make carbohydrates, and carbohydrates make what we want to eat. So if it grows roots or fruit, for example, a carrot or a tomato, you need to put it in the most sun you can. A spot that gets about 6 hours of sun is good. Even more is fine. But if it's root or fruit, it really needs the sun. If you've got an area that's a little shady, you can put your leafy vegetables there and they'll do okay. They love the sun, but they can tolerate a little less than the rooting and fruiting vegetables. So as you go out and look around the property, that's something you might want to consider. You want to pick a spot that's close to water. You need to be able to get a water hose to it. And so as you choose a spot, choose one that's close to water. I like to also say choose one that's very visible, because if you have to look at it, you tend to take care of it better. At least I do, I know. Out of sight, out of mind. And finally, you want to choose a spot that drains well. When it rains, like today, sometimes it rains too much. And a low-lying area, especially in a clay soil where water stands after a rain, is not a great spot for vegetables. As the roots get waterlogged, the plants suffer. So choose a spot that has good drainage. The second thing I want to talk about a little bit today is the soil. We all have different kinds of soil that we're dealing with, and you may be dealing with a heavier clay like this right here. These heavy clays are good at holding water and nutrients, but they're not good at draining well. And when they get dry in the heat of summer, that's what you're dealing with. It's not easy for a root to get through that. So we want to add organic matter to clay, and when you do, a soil like this that's had organic matter added to it, when you squeeze it, it just crumbles apart in your hand. That's called friable, and that's what we want. That's what a root would like to grow in. So we want to give it that kind of environment. The way you improve a heavier clay soil, actually we have a few options. One is to use something called expanded shale. Expanded shale comes in different sizes. Sometimes it looks about like kitty litter, sometimes much larger chunks, but it's been heated very hot so that the rock expands and is very porous. If you got a microscope, it might look like Swiss cheese under the microscope. When you put that in a clay, it helps hold it open, and it lasts a very, very long time. It's not inexpensive to do, but it lasts a long time, so it can save you some money in the long term. The thing we most often do in the soil is add compost. Compost is just dead organic matter. Everything that lives and grows on the earth goes back into the soil and replenishes the soil and just makes it richer and richer. So good, rich compost like this is one of the best things you can do to a clay and also to a sandy soil. While clays don't drain well, sands drain too well. They don't hold water and nutrients, but compost helps improve a sandy soil, and you can buy all kinds of compost. You can make it yourself. In fact, you really ought to not ever let organic matter leave your property. If you've got grass clippings or leaves, they ought to go back in the garden, go into a compost pile, be used as mulch, and release all those nutrients back. Because think about it this way. When you put fertilizer on your lawn and grow a grass clipping, you're growing a leaf full of nutrients that you paid to put on there. When you clip it off, put it in a bag, and have someone haul it away, you're just renting fertilizer. If you return those clippings to the lawn or use them in your garden, you're getting those nutrients back and cycling them again and again. The same is true with tree leaves. So take advantage of all that free organic matter. That's the way nature works, and you can have a better garden as a result. So building your soil up with organic matter or with something like the expanded shale is a good idea. It's also a good idea to build it up into raised beds. Now you can build raised beds a number of different ways. One way is just to pile the soil up into a bed. I like to spread compost over the entire garden area, maybe an inch or two thick, mix it into the soil with a spading fork, or if you like, you can use a rototiller and have a good mix of compost and soil, and then scoop the soil from the walkways and put it up on the beds. And that way you have a high raised bed full of nice mixed soil, and then a walkway that you can put wood chips or leaves or anything like that that you have access to walk on in the garden, and they'll just decompose over time. That's the least expensive way to make raised beds. It's a little bit of work, but it is really not that hard. The other option is to put your beds in some type of a box. That box can be materials that are slow to decompose, naturally rot resistant. We have some beds here at the Leach Gardens. I just want to show you. These are really nice. These would look good in any landscape, but they have naturally rot resistant wood holding the soil. You can use all kinds of materials like, for example, cinder blocks or concrete blocks work really well. Those are inexpensive, and it's almost like playing with Legos. You just set them together, make your beds, fill them full of a good soil mix, and then if you ever want to move the garden, it's possible to do that because they just come right apart. Concrete blocks are perhaps the easiest way to get into a garden, but for something more aesthetically pleasing, There's the paver stones and really nice types of materials like galvanized metal and wood that you can also use. One other thing that you might want to consider is that sometimes beds can be made out of a very, very large container. For example, you might have seen the large oval troughs that ranchers use to water cattle. Those are great for a container bed. All you do is drill some holes in the bottom because they must have good drainage, fill them full of a good quality mix, and go right to town draining. And we have a lot of good ideas for different ways of doing those kind of raised beds in the garden. When you fill them with a mix, you don't want to just use garden soil. Garden soil is fine for out in the garden, but when you get into a container, the roots are really confined. And even if it's a big container, you're taking a plant and putting its roots into a much smaller area than they would be in nature. So that small area has to have the most ideal kind of soil mix that you can have in it in order for them to really thrive and do well. And then you want to make sure it gets water and that it gets fertilizer regularly. The larger your container, the better. But if you get into containers a little smaller, you're just going to have to water them a little more often. Now, in addition to soil and compost and all the mixes, there's a lot of different kinds of mixes that can go in large containers, like that giant cattle water trough, for example. There's regular potting soil. And potting soil typically is a mix of a couple of things. Peat moss, or it could also be coconut coir. That's a more popular one now. And something like perlite. Perlite is a mined rock that's very lightweight, and it helps keep the soil open and airy, keeps the mix lightweight, and helps it to drain well also. So buy a quality mix, whether it's a potting soil or if you go to a place that sells bagged soil or large bulk soil, you can ask them for a bed mix for vegetable gardening. The thing you want to watch for is when you get into containers, especially in beds, you want to watch out for really chunky stuff. If it's got big chunks of wood, it's hard to plant little seeds in something like that. So you want a more finer textured mix, especially up near the surface of the mix. Well, I know some of you are probably having some questions right now, and so I hope you're getting some good answers. If we have some that I could also answer, I would be happy to do a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, there were several that were asking about controlling nematodes that I've seen on there. Some of our hort people may have answered that question, but if you have comments, that would be
there's
great.
a lot of answers to that question, and not a real great one, to be honest. Nematodes are little tiny worms that are in the soil, and they go into the plant root and really mess up the plumbing of the plant. Water and nutrients can't move through. Some plants are really susceptible to them. Nematodes love okra, and they love tomatoes, and they love some of the cucurbits like melons and squash. They love fig trees, for example. Those are all really susceptible to nematodes. Our strategies are, number one, plant something that they don't like. There are tomatoes that have a VFN or other letters after the name. The N stands for nematode resistance, and those are naturally resistant to nematodes. There's some species that nematodes don't tend to bother, and that would also be a good idea.
Skip, there was a question too. One is, how tall should a raised bed be for good growth? And the second is, how do you handle fire ants in your vegetable garden?
All right. A raised bed height, if the bed is sitting on fairly decent soil, just one cinder block high, about 8 inches high, is enough of a bed. It doesn't hurt to go higher. I like to make mine taller, like 2 cinder blocks high, about that height, because I can sit on the side. And rather than stooping all the time in the garden, to be able to sit on the edge of the bed and do your work, that is really helpful. Something else I should mention about that is you want to make your beds no wider than about 4 feet wide, because you want to be able to reach halfway across them from each side of the bed. Especially, you're working with kiddos, and they're going to want to jump up and run into the bed if they can't reach something, and we don't want to walk on our soil in the raised beds. We want to keep it light and fluffy. So about 4 feet wide, about 2 cinder blocks high. Now with 2 cinder blocks high, with whatever the material you're building it out of, about 16 inches high, you can garden on anything. I've seen gardens on asphalt parking lots where they just build up a bed about this high and they put a good mix in it, keep it well watered, and plants grow just fine. So if the only sunny spot you have is that front driveway, there may be an idea for you.
Skip, several questions on fire ants.
Yes.
Any more on that?
Okay, fire ants. Fire ants love it when we go in and moisten the soil and loosen it up and create a lot of things a lot of environment that they enjoy like that. The best way to manage fire ants is with a bait. The only bait I'm currently aware of, and there may be more, for in the garden is one called Come and Get It. It's a spinosad-based bait, which is an organic bait, but it has the spinosad insecticide with a bait, so the ants pick it up and take it back to the mound to kill the mound, the queen and all. There are other baits that can be used around the garden, and most people's gardens are so small that if you just bait around the garden and not in the garden, they're going to go out and find it. Their workers are out there foraging all the time. If you want to check if it's a good time to put out bait, because it's important that the bait is fresh, you want to put a paper, let's say a potato chip or something oily like a tuna fish can or cat food can or something on the ground. Some people even use little slices of hot dogs with a pin flag so they can go back and find them. And come back about 15 minutes, and if there are fire ants on that, that means the ants are feeding and you need to get your bait out then. If you put it out at times when they're not feeding, it sits out in the sun and it can start to go down in quality. You always want to use fresh bait because it's bait. If they're not interested in eating it, then it's not going to work. Just
Skip,
some tips.
a couple of questions people are wanting to know. If they're just getting started planting now, what would be good for them to start with in the garden right now? And
Well,
it may depend on where they are,
It
but
kinda
maybe
depends
some
on where you are.
tips.
Talk to your county extension office. They're going to have suggestions on what to plant when. But once you hit your last average frost date, that's the time when we really go into warm season gardening in earnest. Some of us cheat a little bit and gamble by going a little early because we have such a small window of spring season here. You know, before the last frost date until it gets so hot that some of our summer crops don't want to set very well. But if you get one of those charts from your county, it'll tell you exactly which vegetables to plant at each particular point in the season. But we are at the end of the cool season garden now, and we're starting the warm season garden now. There's still plenty of cool season harvest to be had, but now is when squash, green beans, tomatoes, let's see, cucumbers, sweet corn, things like that can begin to be planted. When it warms up a little bit more, eggplant and peppers do really well. And then as it warms up a little bit more, the warm season crops like southern peas, black-eyed peas, purple hull peas, and okra. I love okra. Let's see what else. Malabar is a green that can be planted in the warm season. We have a lot of warm season crops that we can grow.
Skip, a couple of questions have come in about fertilizers and maybe types and what to use when you get started planting, and then how much to fertilize along the way as your plants are growing.
That is a really good question. Thank you, someone, for asking that. Fertilizers are important because they get the nutrient balance right for the plants that you want to grow. When you're putting your plants out in the ground, their root system is going to be going out into the soil, and they need a good blend of all the nutrients that they need. I don't really care for fertilizers that say this is a tomato fertilizer or this is a rose fertilizer, because the best fertilizer for a tomato or a rose or this basil plant, it depends on what's already in your soil. If your phosphorus is already really high, you don't need more. If your potassium is really low, you probably need a lot. So start with a soil test. You can go to soiltesting.tamu.edu, and maybe one of our guys monitoring the web can type that in the comments chat section. soiltesting.tamu.edu. There's a form. You want to use the urban soil test form, even if you don't live in an urban area. Basically, there's two forms. One is for farmers and ranchers, and one is for around your yard, for horticulture. And so use the urban form, and you can check on there whether you're growing roses or vegetables or whatever. Send your soil in. When the results come back, if you have any questions, you can call your county extension agent and talk to them about what you may want to add. There's going to be options for using synthetic fertilizers, using organic fertilizers, but you get those nutrients right, and then you plant your plants. And after that, a little maintenance is all that's needed. If you don't have time for a soil test, a good general rule of thumb for a lot of vegetables is a fertilizer with a 3:1:2 ratio of nutrients. We use that for our lawn fertilizers a lot. It has quite a bit of nitrogen, which pushes the growth. Most of our soils have plenty of phosphorus, but there are a lot of areas of the state that don't, and I know you're listening from all over. But talk to your county extension office and they can kind of guide you in that.
And Skip, where could they go to find out who their county extension agent is, or where to find those resources?
All right, if someone will type in the AgriLife Extension main webpage, AgriLife Extension. It'll have a list of all the county extension offices. You just click on your county extension office, or you can just Google the name of your county and AgriLife Extension office, and it'll come right up. And you can find out who your local agents are, their phone number and their email, so you can ask them questions.
And just a note for those of you that are hopping on from out of state, every state has their own cooperative extension program that's operated through the Land Grant University for that state. So you have county extension people in your area that can also help with recommendations for your local planting needs.
That's right. And the best gardening information is the local gardening information. And so getting information from not only your local extension office, but experienced gardeners in your area that can kind of guide you. We want you to have success. And if you've been thinking about gardening for a while and thought, you know what, I don't want to plow up the backyard to have that traditional garden, then consider one of the raised beds or the giant containers we've been talking about, or even just start with a small container. If you're going to grow something smaller than a tomato plant, a container that holds about 5 gallons of soil is okay. If it's a tomato, if you could get up a little more than that, it would be better. You just wouldn't have to water it quite as often. Smaller statured vegetables can have a smaller container, but at least start with one container and give it a try. It's not that hard to grow fresh, healthy vegetables in your own yard.
Awesome. Okay, well, we've been going for a little while. Just wanted to let you know that we are going to be doing these every Wednesday and Friday. Be looking on the Aggie Horticulture Facebook page for more information and a complete list of topics that we'll have. And as always, we will have our experts online in the chat area to be able to answer your questions. This will be taped, and so we'll have a video recording that will be posted here. So please continue to look at that. We're able to do this using our social distancing too, so this is a great way for us to get information out to you.
Great. I want to thank all of my fellow cohorts around the state that have been helping with this, and you're going to get to hear from some of them. We've got talks coming up on how to start your own plants from seed. That's one you won't want to miss. On container gardening specifically, on a lot of different gardening topics, so stay tuned. Please come back.
Awesome. So we're going to say goodbye from the Leach Teaching Gardens, and thank you for joining us today. And as always, if you have other questions, look for us on aggiehorticulture.tamu.edu or on the Facebook page. Thank you.